Hello, hello, hello. Hey folks, how are you doing? What's new? Glad you're with us today. Wow, we've got plenty of things to talk about. Yes, we do. We have plenty of things to discuss here today. But why don't we have a quick roll call? If you're watching this right now, why don't you not only list, first of all, I see Tim, I see Orgamecca, I see Kinky, I see Arthur Porter. But if you're watching this, my question, Gentile Cat, Communista, why don't you not only give hello or whatever? I see Tim, I see Lucas Marshall, I see Grant Jarvis, I see Devin Spawn, I see Ramiro. But why don't you also give your location? Say what U.S. state you're in if you're in the United States. Say what country you're in if you're outside the United States. Let's talk about the geographic span of these lives, because we have so much to talk about. I see Tim in the UK. I see someone in Texas. I see Jacob in Louisiana. I see Matthew Jones in North Carolina. I see Alex Giovanni in Oregon. I see Arthur Porter in Arizona. I see province of California. I see Argentina, but from New Zealand. Wow. I see it. Someone from Turkey. I see JT24 not saying where he's from. That's okay. I see someone in Utah. I see someone in North Dakota. I see someone in Aleppo, Syria. I see someone in New York. I see someone in Mississippi. I see someone in Denmark. I see someone in the U.S. originally now living in Austria. I see someone in Atlanta. I see East Germany, Saxony. I see another person in Germany, Adam Jensen. Yes, people are talking about my debate with destiny. It's kind of funny how you put it, my debate with destiny. People almost want to say my date with destiny, but it's my debate with destiny. Wow, folks. Wow. I mean, I've got plenty to say about it. I really do. I really have plenty to say about it. However, before we get to that, I want to make sure that we talk about what we need to talk about. I see someone in Ithaca, New York. Very good. Up by Cornell. I see someone in the Gong. I don't know what the Gong is. I see someone in Serbia. Yes. Wow. Yes, we will get to that debate I did with Mr. Destiny, Stephen what is his last name again? Oh, well, the Destiny video gamer guy. We'll get to that. Don't want to start off with that. But if you're watching now, I see that viewers are piling in. Now is the time to tweet this out, cut and paste. Tweet this out, make this a bigger conversation, invite all your friends to join us, make this a Facebook status. Let's make this community what it is, because that debate wouldn't have happened without all of you. Let's be real. I know a number of you were pushing to force Mr. Destiny, Mr. Bunnell, Mr. Stephen Bunnell to debate me. And if you hadn't done that, it wouldn't have happened. This community is very important. What we do here every week is extremely important. Someone named Maupin Time is here. Yes, we have plenty to discuss. So tweet this out. Spread the word. Let's make this a bigger conversation. So much to discuss today. We will get to. I have quite a few thoughts about that interaction I had with the video gamer fellow. But we have many other things to discuss as well. So, I'm going to pour the beverage that will not be named, and we're going to do our usual thing on the weekends. Sometimes it's Saturday, sometimes it's Sunday, but we always have a great discussion, and we dissect the lies of capitalism. We embrace historical progress. We believe in science. We believe in technology. We believe in advancing the human race. We don't accept the pessimism of our age. We are doing something really phenomenal here, folks. And you are just as much a part of it as I am. Let's be real. So folks are piling in. If you haven't already done it, tweet this out, spread the word, bring more people in. We're having a great time, folks. We are having a great time. So much to talk about. Let's do a little bit of a news roundup. I've been telling you all for weeks. For weeks, I've been telling you all about shale and how the shale drillers are drilling on, they're not drilling, they're fracking on credit. They are fracking on credit. And they're not paying back their loans. And the price of oil is struggling to stay at $50 a barrel. And if they were to indeed see an oil price drop, that this could crash our economy. And I've noticed that the Wall Street Journal had an interesting take on this. In the back, in the exchange section over the weekend, they had an article about frackers drilling on credit, the danger of the shale bubble bursting. But the front page article was talking about low gas prices. I thought that was hilarious, right? That's true, right? Oil prices are dropping along with the natural gas prices. The energy markets that have been fracking on credit and are having trouble to pay it back or threatening to crash the entire U.S. economy. But hey, the price of gas is low. You can always find a positive. You've got to find a positive there. I'm seeing Tim asking me to talk about the drug trade and capitalism. Very good topic, Tim. What else do people want me to talk about today? What other topics are on people's minds? What is new under the sun? The ongoing attempt to balkanize China, says Arthur Porter. Very good. Very, very good. So let's talk about the drug trade, first of all. Drugs, heroin, which is opium, basically. It's opium put in a much more extreme form. It's concentrated. It's cooked. Cocaine, morphine, marijuana, LSD, drugs. Drugs are something that the socialist movement has always opposed. And in fact, a lot of the early socialists were temperance activists. They didn't even believe in drinking alcohol. John Reed, if you've ever seen the movie Reds, if you've ever read 10 Days That Shook the World, John Reed was a big teetotaler, didn't drink any alcohol. And apparently some of the difficulties that he had when he was in Russia were based on the fact that he didn't drink alcohol, and he found some of the wild parties that the Bolsheviks had to be a little bit too much. He was a very teetotaling, not drinking, very refined, wealthy guy, went to Harvard, and the Bolsheviks were working class people who loved to party, and he was apparently quite alienated about it. The Irish National Liberation Movement pushes temperance very hard. At one point in the United States, the labor movement also opposed alcohol. Right? They tell the story of when Irish workers were building the railways in the United States. As they were building them, they would be paid not just in cash, but in whiskey. And that was done for a reason, to make sure that the workers were drunk, to make sure that they were not fully where they're at. They'd get paid at the end of the day with alcohol. It was almost institutionalized, an attempt to keep Irish workers alcoholic, addicted to alcohol. I don't oppose all alcohol. If people want to drink, that's their business. I've drunk before in my life. I don't drink at this point in my life, but it's not really because I have a moral objection to it. It's simply because of the fact that it dries me out. When I drink, I get dry, and it makes me really dry, gives me a headache. Sometimes when I drink, it dries my head immediately. Other times when I drink, I get sick and dry the next morning. But I was at the movies with my wife one afternoon. It was a couple years ago, and it was one of those movie theaters where you can order food and alcohol as you watch the movie. So as the movie was starting, I took a glass of white wine, and I sipped it. And immediately, almost the second that wine touched my lips, I started to have a headache. And we still had a 2.5-hour movie in front of us. And I thought, why in the world do I do this? Every time I were to drink, almost every time I got sick. So at that point, I just decided I was not going to drink anymore. And that's what I did. And it just doesn't go well with my system. And I think that may be hereditary. It may be maybe about my metabolism. I may have an allergy to some of the sugar or some of the contents of alcohol. I don't know what it is, but I don't drink. I just don't. I don't have a moral objection to people doing it. I do know that alcoholism is a very serious problem, but it's not just alcohol, right? There is a reason that the British Empire waged a war to try and get the people of China hooked on opium. When the emperor tried to ban the importing of narcotics, the British didn't just wage one, but two opium wars to force the British to accept narcotics. And it wasn't just narcotics, but to force them to be part of their global free trade economy and basically force them to have their economy demolished economically. Yeah, I mean, absolutely. Alcohol, yeah. You know, drugs, heroin, these things have been things that the socialist movement has always opposed. If you read Towards Soviet America, the William Z. Foster book published for the 1932 elections, when William Z. Foster ran as the communist presidential candidate back in 1932 for president, the book that he wrote, Towards Soviet America, there's a part of it where he talks about prohibition. And he talks about how they would lift the ban on alcohol, how the Communist Party opposed prohibition. However, they would after the revolution, they would make sure that alcoholism and you know what is it, liquorism, or he had a word for it. I assume it meant problem drinking and people being drunken or whatever. They would wipe it out. But he favored ending prohibition, and prohibition was a disaster, right? I mean, the 1920s, people know about the mafia started selling the alcohol, and really what was driving prohibition was really bigotry against Roman Catholics, right? The Protestants, people don't know this now. I mean, this isn't the case any longer. But at that time, you have to remember there have been two major parties in the United States. The Democrats were the party of the Jim Crow South and of the urban political machines. And the Republicans were the party of rural folks, small farmers, and such. They had been the party of Lincoln, but eventually they just became more the rural party. And the rural folks were Protestants, and they were deeply religious rural Protestants. And the urban political machines increasingly were taking in immigrants from Ireland and from Italy and from Eastern Europe. And so as these Roman Catholic immigrants were coming in, and the Democrats became the party of at this point, they became more and more the party of, what would you call it? They became more and more the party of the urban political machines that were taking in all these immigrants. Those immigrants were Roman Catholic, and the Democrats increasingly became the party of Roman Catholics, whereas the Republicans were the party of Protestants. And the Democrats were viewed as more socially liberal because at that point the Catholic Church was a little bit more socially liberal than hardcore Protestants were. So the Republicans basically pushed prohibition as a drive to control the Democrats and to control the inflow of Roman Catholic immigrants. Roman Catholics are allowed to drink alcohol. Protestants are not. Or they are now, but they a long time ago they were not, right? I remember when I was in school in my little town in Ohio, I would ask people, a lot of the old Mennonites and Baptists didn't believe in drinking alcohol. And I would say to them, why would Jesus' first miracle have been turning water into wine if drinking alcohol is against the Christian religion? I had that conversation with many of the very religious conservative folks in my town. One particular time stands out. I don't know why I'm going here, but I'm talking about this. I remember one particular time I had this conversation. It was in my math class, and I sat next to a certain young woman who will not be named. And we were talking about the Bible, or I don't know what it was, but I think I said that when I get to be an adult, I said to her, being a high school student, when I get to be a full legal adult, I think 21 years old, I'll drink alcohol. And she was, oh, no, that you can't do that. That goes against the Bible. That's not right. I said, how does it go against the Bible? And she, we talked a little bit further, and I said, really, now wasn't Jesus Christ's first miracle, according to the scriptures, turning water into wine? And she proceeded to tell me, no, it wasn't wine, because Jesus would never do that, because Jesus was opposed to drinking alcohol. It was grape juice. It was grape juice, and they thought it was wine. They thought it was wine. And I said to her, how did they keep it grape juice? How did they keep it grape juice? There was no pasteurization back then. At which point she then started crying. She started crying. And I was like, oh, fiddlesticks, what did I just do? I had no intention of making this poor girl sitting next to me cry. I wasn't trying to make her cry. I was just... She started crying. And it was awkward. It was very, very awkward. So at that point, the math teacher walked in, class began. The next day, I was a freshman in high school. I'll never forget this. The next day, I walked into class. The math teacher walks in. Caleb, can I see you out in the hall today? I want to see you out in the hall before we begin class. And I'm like, oh boy. I go out in the hall. Math teacher says to me, Caleb, you will not make fun of other people's religions. I said, I wasn't. Well, I don't care. And then he moved my seat to the other side of the room. So that's my story about engaging with an evangelical fundamentalist Protestant about the drinking of alcohol. Yeah, that was pretty strange. Pretty strange encounter. But there you go. Wow. See a lot of people posting a lot of different things they want me to talk about. But yeah, I mean, the drug trade, right? So we know for a fact that in Afghanistan, when the Mujahideen were being actively, covertly supported by the United States and Saudi Arabia to fight against... People say they were fighting the Soviet Union. They were not fighting the Soviet Union. They were fighting the People's Democratic Republic of Afghanistan, which came into being in 1978 after the Sour Revolution. And when the People's Democratic Republic of Afghanistan came into being, when the People's Democratic Party rose up, wrote a new constitution, created a new country, the response of the United States was to begin working with extremist Wahhabis and jihadists and Deobandis and Sunni fanatics, Salafis, of the Bin Laden ilk to topple the People's Democratic Republic. And the Soviet Union sent its forces to defend the People's Democratic Republic. But they were not fighting the Soviet Union. But when that was happening, when Osama bin Laden and his pals were getting help from Zbigniew Brzezinski and the Saudi military and Saudi-made weapons and the CIA, when they were all in Afghanistan, one of the ways that the Afghan terrorists were able to get funding was through selling heroin. That's what they did. And the ISI, I believe, the Pakistani secret police, at that point Pakistan was a military dictatorship aligned with the United States, they worked with the secret police and they arranged for heroin to be shipped in and out of Afghanistan. And that was a way that the terrorists could make money without getting directly funded, right? By making sure they didn't get arrested with intelligence agencies, making sure that they didn't get busted for selling heroin, enabling them to get into the heroin trade. That was a way that money could flow into the hands of the terrorists that were fighting against the People's Democratic Party of Afghanistan. And the same thing was done with the Contras. This is an old U.S. intelligence agency CIA trick. The Contras in Nicaragua, right? Nicaragua had its socialist revolution around the same time. 1 year later, 78 was Afghanistan, 79 was Nicaragua. The Sandinista government comes into power. So the CIA helps the Sandinistas to get in on the drug trade and start, shipping cocaine into the United States at the same time that they're fighting to overthrow the government of Nicaragua. And eventually Congress, the U.S. Congress, outlawed the funding of the Contra terrorists in Nicaragua. Why did they do that? Well, Europe did not approve of the Contra War, and the Contras in Nicaragua were very anti-Catholic. See, now we're back to religion again, right? In the 1980s, the Roman Catholic Church was in favor of more open democratic governments in Latin America. The Sandinistas had priests in their government, and the Roman Catholic Church, they weren't in a red-baiting anti-communist hysteria. They had been in the 1950s, but they were not during the 70s and 80s. So as a result of that, the fanatical anti-communists of Latin America started to become evangelical Christians, like Rios Montt, the military dictator of Guatemala. And so much to the fact that Jerry Falwell, the moral majority fundamentalist preacher of the United States, was flying to Nicaragua, flying to Guatemala, flying to Central America to lead these big prayer meetings. And because the Catholic Church was critical of U.S. foreign policy, at that point, it was evangelicals that started to be the favored religion of the fanatical anti-communists of Latin America. Very interesting stuff. And as a result, you had the fanatical anti-communists in Nicaragua, the Contras, killing priests and nuns. That happened on more than one occasion. They would go to a monastery they thought was harboring communists. They would go to a convent that was harboring communists. They would see a priest that was maybe working with the literacy volunteers from Cuba, kill them. So the Catholic Church was very opposed to it. The Democratic Party was very opposed to U.S. support for the Contras. The Democrats had no love for, of course, the Sandinista government, and even the Pope, John Paul II, scolded, I believe he scolded that priest who had a role in the government of Nicaragua. He didn't approve of that priest taking on that job, but the Catholic Church felt like the Contras were not their friends. And the Catholic Church favored, rather than the violent overthrow of the Contras, they favored some kind of alliance, maybe free elections, something like that. So, in that situation, the Contras increasingly started selling drugs, and that was a way they could get funding. After Congress banned funding of the Contras, a way that they could continue making money was the U.S. Central Intelligence Agency making sure they didn't get arrested when they smuggled not heroin, but cocaine into the United States. It's famous, right? There was actually a pretty good movie. Hollywood movies are often not too good. There was a very good movie called American Made, starring Tom Cruise. And it was very good, and it came out a couple years ago. And Tom Cruise, it's fictionalized, but he plays this pilot who is helping the Contras and working with the CIA and is eventually involved in the drug trade. I think it's a very good movie. What I thought was interesting is the movie, number one, with every Hollywood movie, right? A Hollywood movie is a political act. Movies don't just happen, right? Millions of dollars a lot of movies cost. A big Hollywood movie that gets wide distribution, they're spending millions of dollars there. It's a very, very, very political decision to make a movie. Movies don't just get made. I mean, maybe if you take your phone and you make a little video, that's one thing. But $1 million Hollywood budget movies that get huge distribution are not accidents. They never are. So as I was sitting there in the theater watching American Made, starring Tom Cruise, I was thinking, how did this movie get made? I mean, this is a movie that's basically an attack on the CIA. It's saying the CIA was involved in the cocaine trade. It basically shows the CIA stabbing one of their guys in the back. Right? So how did this movie get made? I was wondering that as I was sitting there watching American Made. Well, two things occurred to me. Thing number one, I noticed that the movie went after Bill Clinton by name. Right? In the movie, they show Bill Clinton, governor of Arkansas, protecting this drug dealer, this guy who's dealing drugs. And they make a big point of that. The prosecutor is so excited to start prosecuting this guy. Bill Clinton makes a phone call, and this guy who's doing millions and millions of dollars in drugs doesn't get busted. So I figured, okay, maybe this is like the Trump movement is behind this movie. Like, this was Trump people. They wanted to get this out there. We all know they hate Hillary. Crooked Hillary. It's like an obsession of the Trump people. It's all true. A lot of what they say is true. Almost everything they say is true. I mean, obviously, within reason, right? But a lot of their criticism of the Clinton presidency is true. So maybe that occurred to me. The fact they were singling out Clinton, I thought, okay, maybe this is a Trump movie. However, something number two came to me, which is that Tom Cruise is a very well-known, to be a member of the Church of Scientology. And the Church of Scientology, number one, is very anti-drug. And number two, the Church of Scientology is also being targeted by American media at this time. So they kind of see American media as their enemy. And number three, the Church of Scientology promotes conspiracy theories about UFOs and all kinds of stuff in the mental health industry. And they're known for promoting the kind of thing that we call conspiracy theories. They don't, they're not as blatant as you would think, but they talk UFOs, they talk about mental health being a means of social control. A lot of the narrative of the Church of Scientology is kind of a conspiracy theory narrative. So I thought, okay, so Tom Cruise is making this movie. He's a Scientologist, and this movie aligns with the Scientology worldview, right? Drugs are bad. The CIA and the government are secretly part of a conspiracy. The media is no good. So it aligns with the Church of Scientology worldview, which is Tom Cruise, number one. Secondly, it aligns kind of with the Trump worldview, crooked Hillary and whatnot. So that's what I was thinking while I was watching that. I'm like, how did this movie get made? The other thing, though, to be fair, right, and I thought this movie was kind of an attack on the CIA. It was an attack on the CIA in a lot of ways. It showed the CIA doing bad things, not doing, the other thing, though, that occurred to me, and this is an important thing you have to remember, is that it's widely understood, it's known, it's documented at this point, that people being armed and trained by the CIA were also involved in cocaine dealing. The Contras of Nicaragua, who the CIA worked hand and foot with, Elliot Abrams worked hand and foot with, the 1980s CIA, that's, the Bush, Reagan, that CIA was working hand in hand with the Contras. That's well documented. Everyone knows that. But why did it just hit Hollywood now? Why did it just hit Hollywood now? Why did Hollywood why was the big decision to make a movie exposing it made? What was that about? Well, it occurred to me also, and again, this is all speculation. What do I know? I wasn't in the boardroom when they decided. I wasn't where they funded the movie. And I'm speculating, right? Part of it is controlling the narrative, right? If I was the CIA, I would want a movie like American Made to be made, and I would want to be there, sitting there, editing it. And that, you'll notice, is an interesting part of how things go. They control the narrative, right? Everyone knows they did something bad. So if they can control the narrative around the bad thing they did, they can do it in a way that they come out safer, right? That occurred to me as well, right? It's better you hear it from a movie that maybe some CIA people were able to sit down, and I'm just speculating. What do I know, right? It was a good movie. I thought it was a good movie. But every so often you see, Hollywood do things that seem almost socialist or far left, but they do it in a way that it's almost damage control. Like, I really like Leonardo DiCaprio's movies. I tend to really like them. They say that Hollywood actors, when they get to be that big, they pick a script. At that point, if they pick a script, the movie gets made. If they'll attach their name to a project. They're that big that they don't have to just take every role offered to them. They find scripts they like, etc. Well, Leonardo DiCaprio made that movie about J. Edgar Hoover, the founder of the FBI. That movie was great, and it was things I had been telling people for years. This is years ago this movie came out, maybe a decade ago. I had been telling people for years, I said, the FBI blackmailed Martin Luther King. They threatened Martin Luther King. They urged him to commit suicide. And people would look at me and go, oh, really? Yeah, and did the space aliens do it too, Caleb? I'd say, no, it's documented. There was this thing called COINTELPRO. And they'd say, oh, come on. You don't believe that, do you? It was unbelievable. People thought COINTELPRO, which was a very Googleable term at the time, was a tinfoil hat conspiracy theory I made up or tripped on LSD to dream up. And then this movie came out. Leonardo DiCaprio, and there it is, on the movie screen in front of you. Him threatening Martin Luther King, him engaging in all kinds of illegal wiretapping. You see what J. Edgar Hoover did. Prior to that, everyone looked at me and said, you don't believe that, do you? But then, and this is what you have to remember, this is why these kind of movies get made. Then, it comes out and they're like, you'd say to people, didn't, J. Edgar Hoover, wiretap Martin Luther King and all that? And he's like, yeah, but that was because he was gay and he had a relationship with his mother and he was really egotistical. And suddenly there's a narrative around it that makes it not a condemnation of the system. If before, you had been a person who thought everything in the USA was randy-dandy and there were no problems, and then you discovered that, wow, the FBI, this institution I'm supposed to trust, I'm supposed to believe that whatever they do is good and they're just trying to keep me safe. They went after Martin Luther King, who's a good guy. Oh my God, I'm starting to question the system. I'm starting to think critically. Maybe the US system isn't the best, maybe. But then you see it in a Hollywood movie, and it's like, oh, okay, so it did happen, and you hear, it's better to hear it from them than to hear it from people that are opposed to the status quo, right? That's the whole thing, right? It's like if there's a friend in your life, say you screw over a friend of yours, right? You make a mistake. Isn't it better that you come to them and say, hey, I screwed up, than for them to find out about it on their own and come to you and say, hey, right? You always look better. Let's be real. Everybody knows this. It's always better when people hear about your flaws from you first. And why is that? Because as you're admitting the flaw, you can smooth it over. You look like an honest person, right? Because you're admitting your flaw. You're humbling yourself. Right? It's always better to hear about your flaws from you than it is from your detractor, or for the person to figure it out on their own and come to you and say, hey, right? So, there you go, right? I think it's fascinating. But no, I mean, it is a crazy thing. I'm here talking about drugs and CIA and stuff, but, in the late 70s, there was the Church Committee of the U.S. Congress that investigated the FBI and CIA and revealed all kinds of stuff about COINTELPRO and all of this, and it was all over the newspapers in like the Carter era, the time when Carter was president, right? It was the Church Committee. They revealed the FBI's misconduct against the civil rights movement and against peace activists, and they revealed CIA activities and involvements in coups, all kinds of documents. The Church Committee was a big deal, the Congressional Church Committee that investigated the FBI and CIA during the 1970s. And when that happened, when the Church Committee was investigating the FBI and CIA, all kinds of things were made public, like what they did to Martin Luther King, like what they did to peace activists, like what they did in coups around the world. But then it's like weird. After that, it dropped out of public memory. It's bizarre. I was born in 1987. And when I was growing up, no one knew anything about all of this. In the 90s, when I was a kid, no one knew anything about all of this. It had been all over the TV about a decade before I was born. It had completely dropped out of public memory. And in the 90s, up into the 2000s, as I was getting politically educated and becoming more involved in politics, the response to anyone who raised what was common knowledge in 1977 and 1978, what was all over the news, if you raised that during that time, during the 90s, during the 2000s, people would say to you, oh my God. And they would think you were a nutty conspiracy theorist if you believed that COINTELPRO existed, if you believed that CIA coups happen, that the CIA overthrows governments. If you believed any of that, you were a kook. You were, a kook. It's very interesting. Now, the internet and social media has changed a lot of that. Now a lot of that information is, once again, available. So I think it's very interesting to see how these things work. But yeah, now, what was the Church Committee about? What was the Church Committee about? What was that about? Why was the U.S. Congress investigating the FBI and the CIA like crazy? Why were they doing that? Well, because everyone admits that during the 1960s, late 60s, early 70s, there was a domestic political crisis in the United States. It wasn't an economic crisis, but urban rebellions among the African American community. 1968, April, Martin Luther King is killed. The whole country, every urban area in the country practically goes up in flames. People fighting the police, right? The anti-Vietnam War movement, the uprisings on the campuses. There was a domestic political crisis in the United States from about 1968 up until about 1972. Big, right? College students protesting, African-American community rebelling and fighting in the streets. And, you had Nixon who came in. His job was to, bring the hammer down, and he did in a lot of ways. And a lot of it was very liberal, too. He lowered the voting age to 18. He ended the Vietnam War, right? He pulled out of Vietnam. What else did he do? He created OSHA, the Office of Workplace Health and Safety. He created the EPA. He created the first affirmative action policies. The Nixon administration was kind of an attempt to, in a kind of a strongman way, put in a bunch of dramatic reforms that would control it. But he also told the FBI to take off the gloves and just go after the Black Panthers, go after these civil rights people. So the Nixon was like the strongman Bonapartist who came in to crush that political upsurge. And a lot of that was favoring the FBI over the CIA, favoring the Pentagon over intelligence agencies. With Vietnam, unlike Lyndon Johnson, who'd been kind of reluctant and frustrated, Nixon went all in with massive bombing campaigns, and then when that didn't work, he went all out. Okay, we're done, right? Whereas Johnson had been trying not to escalate, whereas Nixon came in there, we're going to go all in, massive bombing, then we're going to go out, right? The Nixon was like the right-wing Bonapartist. And then, you'll notice, after the political crisis ended, right? 1972, the political crisis is over. 1971, it was almost over, right? So after that happens, then, at that point, Nixon continues to do his strongman thing, because he's Nixon, right? He's got all this power. He also won't play ball with neoliberalism, right? Nixon, let's not forget that he advocated a guaranteed minimum income for U.S. citizens, very pro-union, was very friendly with the Teamsters Union. So Nixon is not playing ball with neoliberalism, and he's got an enemies list, he's wiretapping people. So Nixon is, he's the only U.S. president to ever resign, driven from office by scandal. Then we have Gerald Ford, and then we have, the Democrats are back in the White House with Jimmy Carter. And Jimmy Carter is very much, his presidency, and he only got 4 years, didn't get the second term, but his presidency almost is kind of what you might call like truth and reconciliation for the 1960s. He pardons the draft dodgers, right? Not the draft resistors, mind you, who went to prison and said, I will not fight. Didn't pardon them, but if you fled to Canada, he pardoned you. He formed like the women's committee, right? And had all the American women get together for these big meetings to vote about what the women want because they're underrepresented in politics. He's a major environmentalist. That's the Carter presidency. And in a lot of ways, the Carter presidency also included the Church Committee. And the Church Committee is exposing the nefarious activities of the FBI and CIA in the 50s and 60s. And so that was part of it. And it was part of admitting, okay, things got out of control. Look, some government actors did some bad things. Let's all get along. It was kind of part of that truth and reconciliation for the 1960s. That's what the Church Committee, the Congressional Church Committee was. Now, for those of you that are into lefty history, though, during that time, one interesting event that happened is the U.S. Socialist Workers' Party, the big Trotskyist party in the United States that recruited a lot of 60s radicals, that had organized the big protests against the Vietnam War with the National Mobilization Against the Vietnam War, MOB, it was called. The Socialist Workers' Party, the big Trotskyite organization, they sued the FBI. They took the FBI to court. It's actually very famous, and it got a lot of publicity. It was a big deal. In fact, this major Trotskyite group took the FBI to court, and they sued the FBI. And they won. They argued that the FBI had violated their freedom of assembly with all of its activities. And they've published a book, I believe, describing FBI infiltration and all kinds of bad things that happened. But what happened at the same time that the Socialist Workers' Party, was taking the FBI to court, they died as an organization. It destroyed them. In 1976, they ran a guy for president named Peter Camejo, who was a Venezuelan American who'd been a 60s radical. He got a huge amount of votes, Peter Camejo. For a socialist in the United States post-World War II, he did very well. In fact, I believe Bernie Sanders was even one of his delegates, was like an elector for him in Vermont, if I'm not mistaken. Like the young Bernie Sanders was working with that campaign, and it got thousands of votes. The Socialist Workers' Party, the Trotskyites, The U.S. Trotskyite Party, 1976, they ran an election campaign that was very much an election campaign that was, I mean, it was a movement campaign, right? The Communist Party, they ran election campaigns, but it was kind of symbolic. They felt like the Republicans were fascists and they were supporting the Democrats in a way. Whereas, their campaigns were just kind of advertising, we're going to make a statement, we're going to recruit, but we really want you to vote for the Democrats. Don't really vote for us. This is just kind of an advertising campaign for our party. That's what the Communist Party did. But the Socialist Workers' Party, their campaign was all about, we got to keep the 1960s going, right? We need big anti-war rallies to happen. We need to keep being activists. They were the movementist campaign, right? Whereas the Communist Party was join the CP, vote for the Democrats, and hey, there's this great group called the Communist Party you might be interested in. But the Socialist Workers' Party was telling people, don't vote for the Democrats or the Republicans. We're the campaign that represents the movement. 1976, Peter Camejo runs for president. And for a socialist, in the United States, post-1950, he did pretty well. But at the same time, they took the FBI to court. They took the FBI to court, and it destroyed them. I mean, oh my God. I mean, it destroyed them. Right? At one point, from what I understand, they were told by the FBI or by some court proceeding that 1 in 3 of their members worked for the FBI. Now, can you imagine that? Say you're in a political group and you get an official document from the government that says 1 in 3 people in the group are working for the FBI. You'd be a little bit nervous there, wouldn't you? Wouldn't you? It wasn't true, actually. It was a much lower percentage of the organization. But of course, that, made them, crazy paranoid. Right? They began having all kinds of factional fights, expelled all kinds of people for all kinds of stuff. You read, I like to read these old 60s memoirs, right? I read Barry Shepard's memoir, read the memoir of Leslie Evans. I read the memoir of Peter Camejo. I've got his memoir as well. You read this, you get the impression that, okay, so they took the FBI to court, and they won a huge legal settlement, and they looked good, and they were all over the news. Look, the FBI harassed. They lost. They lost. I mean, oh my God, they lost. I mean, I guess they're still around, right? There's still people that sell the militant, but in terms of membership, this is a group that probably had 2,000-3,000 members at one point. And, at this point, the group is less than 100, I think. I've heard maybe 200, but I think that's a little bit exaggerated. The Socialist Workers' Party, they sued the FBI, and it destroyed them. But that was during that Church Committee time, right? The Church Committee was going on. There was a lot of mainstream media talk about the crimes of the FBI in the 60s, the crimes of the FBI in the 50s, the crimes of the CIA. It's fascinating. The 1970s, it seemed like the political crisis had ended, but there was still this thing that was left over from the political crisis, this thing called the movement. The movement, right? I'm not a fan of the movement, by the way, right? I'm not, right? Edward Bernstein said the movement is everything, the goal is nothing. I'm not a fan of the movement. I say that people that believe in socialism need to get out of the movement and to the masses, because the movement is a very, very isolated thing. It's isolated from U.S. society. It is people that are considered fringe, that go to rallies, that protest, that are counterculture. The movement is not a good thing at this point, right? Maybe, in the 60s, the movement was arguably a good thing. It was opposition to the Vietnam War. It was progressive. It was anti-imperialist. It was heavily infiltrated and being manipulated by the government, but it was a thing to oppose the Vietnam War with. It was a thing to meet people who'd be open to socialism. But now, this entity that's left over from the 60s called the movement is detrimental. Because now, we don't have a booming U.S. economy. Now there are millions of people in the United States who'd like to hear about socialism. And if you are part of the movement, and you play by the rules of the movement, they'll never listen to you. They never will. It's like the movement has developed into this entity that thinks average Americans are its enemies, that defines itself as being in opposition to U.S. society, that they don't want to recruit people. They don't want to win people over. They want to feel good about themselves, and a lot of them hate Bernie Sanders. They think Bernie Sanders, a lot of them, these people that think that if you wave an American flag, you're a Nazi, right? I've had that directed at me. I must be a Nazi because I have displayed an American flag before, clearly, right? And I guess Martin Luther King was a Nazi too because he waves the American flag. But this is how movement people think. If you display the American flag, that's the equivalent of being a Nazi. These are not serious human beings. But that's what the movement has become. The movement has become a place for people that don't like U.S. society, that are resentful, that are angry. They feel like they don't fit in, and they can go there and be alienated and be upset. And it's not ever going to bring socialism to power. The movement is actually what's probably the biggest detriment to socialism in the United States, I would say. This movement that exists of people that sit around, that have cage rallies and protest cages, and scream and yell and speak a language that average Americans can't understand, and think any effort to try and win socialism, and win people over to a socialist position is somehow breaking the rules. That's my position. I don't know how we got there, but millennial socialism is very different from the movement. See, I was in the movement for a long time. I'm not anymore. But millennial socialism is very different from the movement. And in some ways it's better, and in some ways it's not. And that brings me to what I want to talk about, to what you all are waiting for me to talk about. Yes, I debated Destiny, the game streamer. Let's talk about it. Let's talk about it, folks. I'm ready to talk about it. What the hell happened in that debate? What do you folks think? I see a lot of people telling me, great job. Thank you. Thank you. Folks, the first point I want to make about that debate I did with Destiny the Game Streamer is this. We won. We won. I didn't win. We won. Because it was a collective effort. That debate would never have happened without all of you. I'm being serious. The debate would never have happened without, I see Katie Lux, without Owen Stevens, without Steven Schneider, without, my friend Sal in Michigan, this debate was a win for all of us. We made this happen. The fact that there are enough of us who see socialism this way, we made this happen. This was a collective effort. I looked up the guy and thought, do I really want to listen to this, says Kinky. Yeah, I kind of felt the same way, but we made this happen. This was a result, this was a victory for this community of people who listen to YouTube Lives every week. We come in here, you guys tell me what to talk about, we have a back and forth, we have an exchange, we tweet this out, we make this a bigger community. We won. He was forced to argue with an actual socialist. We won. We won. And we, the community, surrounding these lives, surrounding this YouTube channel, we won. And we're a growing community, and we're not just online, right? I'm going to be in Providence next week. I'll be going near Brown University. We're going to have a great event at a coffee shop. It's going to be great. If you're in Providence, please come by. It'll be at Community Cafe. I'll be doing an event around the new book. I'm going to be doing classes here in New York. We have meetups. We are a community here. We are a joint operation. And we won. We won. Because not only did we force this well-known person who I had never heard of, not only did we force him to engage us, but we engaged him in a successful way. And I did a lot of preparation for that debate because I knew he would challenge everything I said. And he did. And I brought a lot of facts with me. Yeah, we won. We won. And I wonder, personally, if he will put it on his YouTube channel. I wonder if he will, right? It's on the channel of the guy who hosted the debate. It's on my channel. You can watch it on this channel. I wonder if Destiny will put it on his channel. I wonder if he will, because there were times where he looked not so good. And that brings me to, I'll give you my thoughts on the debate. So I'm going to talk about what went well. What went well in the debate? Okay, there were two golden moments. Golden moment number one was a bit long, and it was when Destiny did, and this was, I mean, it was worth it just for this. This moment, the fact that so many people will have to watch this, made the entire debate worthwhile. If nothing else had happened in the debate but this, it would be good. About halfway through, he starts giving me central planning has never worked anywhere, it's never accomplished anything, and I start throwing statistics at him about Soviet economic production, about China's economic successes. And he comes back at me with, well, this famine happened here, and I didn't let him get away with it. And we went back and forth, and he revealed what I have been telling you all for so long, which is huge economic miracles happened in the Soviet Union, huge economic miracles have happened in China, huge economic miracles have happened in Cuba, and the way that the prevailing narrative avoids talking about it, the way they avoid talking about it is they lie through omission and emphasis, right? The Soviet Union became a global superpower overnight. I mean, not overnight, but they became a global superpower. They industrialized, they became very, very powerful economically. But no one can acknowledge that, and they just point to the famines. Oh, no, there was a famine in the early 30s, so therefore it doesn't count. And Destiny tried that, and he tried his hardest, because he probably truly believes this. I believe he truly probably believes this. No, so, you know, the entire experience of socialism in China and in the USSR has been nothing but famines and starving. And that's not true. He knows it's not true. And I watched him struggle to just try to keep that fiction alive, that central planning failed. And it's a fiction that he just couldn't keep alive. And he tried. He really, really tried. And I came back at him, and there's no way you can watch that debate. There's no way you can watch that debate and be an intellectually honest person. We all have our what do you call it? Our you know, it's in the eye of the beholder. We all have our bias. But I mean, that was beautiful. I'm hoping that at some point I will take that section of the debate where he struggles to try and tell me the Soviet Union wasn't an economic success, that China wasn't an economic success. He struggles. He's trying so hard to maintain this socialism failed everywhere it's ever been tried fiction. And he insists it's not socialism. He's saying central planning failed. He loves to quibble over little things and that was beautiful. The other part that was beautiful was we started talking Venezuela. And he, off the bat, says that Venezuela was very successful until 2014, and then he tries to say, well, they became more socialist in 2014. And I called him out on the fact that, really, why does everyone say that that's not the case? And he doesn't care, right? He's not saying that. And it's classic, right? It's classic. Now, I don't know this Destiny guy. I don't know him from Adam. But I know a lot of people who are like him, I should say, well, I shouldn't even say they're like him. I know a lot of people that I've argued with socialism about. And it's interesting to me that common knowledge that's all over U.S. media is that Venezuela has never had any economic successes. They became socialist. They're all starving because of socialism. And he's smart enough to know that's not true, but he doesn't really seem bothered. And that's what shocked me. He didn't seem bothered by the fact that that's what everyone believes. And and he still has a negative perception of the Venezuelan government. And it's like the fact that there is this something that he knows is false, is so widely spread throughout U.S. society. It's like, okay, well, he doesn't think that. So I couldn't, it was beyond me. I had to comment, and I could tell it was frustrating to him. It might have even been frustrating to people in the audience. Maybe it was. But I kept emphasizing, wow, so even you, who's sitting here grilling me, you admit that the narrative is, I mean, it was a special moment. Now, there are a couple of moments of the debate. The part of the debate that I thought didn't go in my favor was he continued to press me to try and lay out a blueprint of socialism. If you watch it, and I'm reluctant to do that. And the reason is, right, so it's like, what would be nationalized in socialism? Again, like, and this is what gets me to the bigger point, which is, okay, millennial socialism is very different from the socialism that we have seen, you know. He wants me to, basically, you know, the guy's a video gamer. He wanted me to play SimCity. And I remember SimCity. It was a computer game when I was like a kid. He wanted me to play SimCity. He wanted me to sit there, and I'm surprised, I tweeted this out, I'm surprised he didn't ask me what kind of coffee cup they have in socialist countries. Right? You know, is the coffee cup going to be... And it's a technique he uses. And, you know, it's like, so I sit there and I lay out an elaborate blueprint of, yes, all the roads under socialism will be made out of concrete, and all of the coffee cups will be purple. And then he sits there and goes, well, your society sucks because coffee cups that are green are not as good as coffee cups that are purple. Ha, 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 ha. And it's this... It has no relevance. In some socialist societies, hotels are nationalized. In some socialist societies, they're not. So if you tell me I'm stupid for believing that hotels are nationalized, and you have some really good comeback for that, that doesn't destroy socialism in any way. But that's kind of what was missing. I noticed that in the comments, when I looked over the comments of the debate, someone said what he doesn't get is that socialism is not a policy, it's a mode of production. And that's exactly right. You find very little in Karl Marx's writings about what socialist societies will look like. I mean, there's some, but there's not much. The reason for that being that socialism is not a blueprint for an ideal world. It's not a utopia. It is a mass movement resulting from the problems of capitalism, struggling to seize control of the means of production. And that I admit, though, to your average person, though, we do look like utopians. Right? And I mean, for years I've had these conversations with people. And people are like, remember when I was in high school, someone said to me, would we be able to have amusement parks under communism? I said, sure, why not? You know, someone said to me, would we be able to, I mean, what kind of food would be available under communism? It's people really think that we're sitting there, those of us who advocate socialism, are sitting there writing out, it's like 1984, or it's like Anthem by Ayn Rand, or it's like every, sci-fi anti-communist thing we've ever seen, where there's like this dark, sinister utopia. And we're sitting here, what we do as advocates of socialism is we write a positive utopia. I mean, and that's not what it is, right? But if you're not familiar with Marxism, to people who've never encountered Marxism before, when I first got interested in socialism, that's what I thought it is. And so, by not giving him, and I gave him my 4 points that I've listed in talks before, because that's how he knows to debate, right? That's how he knows to debate, and it worked out. I gave him my 4 points, that I thought oil should be nationalized, that I thought we should have a big infrastructure program, that banking should be nationalized, and that we should have the 4 freedoms, the economic Bill of Rights that Roosevelt proposed. We did it, and we were able to argue on those lines. But what I thought was amusing was, that there was such a hard push for a perfect blueprint. And the hard push was around things that I don't think necessarily make a society socialist or not socialist. I guess that was the difference. But whatever. Now, some observers have looked at the debate, and they've said that for a while it looks like I'm advocating direct democracy. And that's a flaw in some of my rhetoric, right? I should have been clear that I wasn't advocating direct democracy. I'm not saying it's what the people want. I'm saying that's, socialism comes into being as a result of a mass struggle in the United States, and what does that mass movement to create socialism strive for? He thought I was saying that there would be a direct democracy. And that's why it got a little bit weird. And he's like, well, would everyone vote on the interest rates or whatever? That was interesting. So, I thought it was a win. It was a win for all of us here. All of us who are watching, it's a win. I think we won that one. And I will say, there's part of me, I'll admit, that almost wants to be like, he's a game streamer, a video game player. But I don't want to be that way, right? And it made me think right? And this is getting to a larger point, right? Old and young diverge on values. You know, as you all know, I'm not from the cities. I'm not from the suburbs. I'm from a small town in Ohio. My graduating class was like 115 people. And, you know, I didn't play video games growing up. And the reason I didn't play them is my parents wouldn't allow me to play them. And, I mean, there was this attitude, and it was never really stated, right? It was never really stated. But there was this feeling among my family, mainly, that, you know, that, like, playing video games was, like, morally wrong, right? It's like, you shouldn't be playing a video game. You should be, you know, you should be reading a book to learn something new. You should be, you know, I mean, and I don't want to think that way, right? And I don't think there's anything wrong with playing video games, but I just never got into it. And I think about the value system that I grew up with, and it's funny because in a lot of ways, despite the fact that I have a far left worldview, I'm quite conservative, right? I mean, let's be real. I'm very much that old America, right? I mean, the old America didn't believe in socialism. There were socialists in it, but they didn't win. They didn't prevail. But it's almost like, you know, it's weird. I'm that old, you know, there's that American attitude. You're talking about the American way, or the American, there's that old, you know, and it's very white, and it's very settler-oriented, and it's something that, I mean, I certainly didn't like growing up around it, and maybe it, you know, isn't a good thing. I mean, there's a lot of things about it that aren't good, but there is this feeling, right? People talk about, they say, Caleb, do you ever relax? Do you ever relax, Caleb? You just go, 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 go. Here it is. I'm on a 3-day weekend. I'm sitting in front of you, talking about politics. I'm not sitting on the beach. I'm not, and there's a part of me that just go, go, go. Work, work, work hard. Work, work, work hard. So the idea of playing a video game, to me, it's like there's a voice in the back of my head if I were to pick up a controller that would go, I shouldn't be doing this. I should be doing something productive with my time. It's not healthy. I should be able to relax more. But I'm not the only person that's like that. Right? I mean, this is the Tom Sawyer kind of thing. There's this old America, right? And it's what, you know, these Trump people, and not just these Trump people, but a lot of these evangelicals and all of that, they're like dedicated to reviving this old America. I'm not committed to the old American thing, but it's very much my influence. So when I'm like, this guy's a game streamer, I'm like, are you serious? But I looked at his view count. No, this guy is, you know, he's a serious personality on social media, right? He's a big deal. Destiny is a big deal. I'm just being real. I am totally being real here. Destiny is a big deal. But there's a part of me that just doesn't want to recognize that he's a big deal. And that's a problem. But that says more about me than it does about him. And I think that's interesting. I think it's very interesting. But part of the reason he was pushing me so hard to play SimCity is because millennial socialism is not the movement. And millennial socialism isn't classic Marxism either. Millennial socialism, I have differences with it. My belief in socialism is rooted in optimism. I'm optimistic. I want us to get to a better world. I want to be part of something. I want to feel like I'm going out and working hard to get us into a better world. I have this idea of a good future on the horizon. I am very, very optimistic. I'm an optimistic guy. In fact, my struggle to remain optimistic and to think that tomorrow will be better than today seems to be what drives me to be a socialist. I am full of optimism, and I want to be full of optimism. I want to believe that there's a good thing ahead on the horizon. And it fits in with that go, 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 the fact that I never relax, the fact that I never play video games. It fits in with that. But for a lot of people that are millennials, that are millennial socialists, that are Bernie Sanders supporters, it's the opposite. And that's okay. I need to understand it. People can be however they want to be. I'm not trying to pass judgment. I'm talking about the way I am, and I'm talking about the way the other people are, and I'm just trying to make sense of all of this. for a lot of these people that are millennial socialists, like I did that thing that I've done it many times on the lives here about what is the Bernie Sanders movement. It's, for years they've said, hey, you want free healthcare? You can't do that. That's socialism. Oh, you want guaranteed education? Can't do that. That's socialism. So, the millennial generation comes along and says, fine, I'm a socialist, fine. And it's this kind of, they accept the label, they kind of accept the McCarthyite Tea Party definition of socialism. The Tea Party says, oh, the government spending is socialism, so they say, okay, fine, I'm a socialist then. But there's an element of pessimism in that. It's like, the world sucks, so why can't I get some free stuff? It's not that we're going to build an ideal society, we're going to advance, it's kind of this pessimism. It's kind of a pessimistic socialism. It's like, the world sucks, so yeah, they give Wall Street bankers have so much shit, so like, why don't they give me some shit? Right? Like, I mean, we, they get big tax cuts. Well, why can't I get some health care, all right? Like, screw it. Yeah, there's this element of kind of like feeling negative about the world. And this negative about the world feels like, well, other people have it good. I have it bad. I'm resentful about having it bad. So why don't I get something? It's this kind of, it's different. And it's not the same emotion that I feel. It's more of this kind of pessimistic resentment that we see in our generation. And it comes from very, very good places. I mean, look at the job market out there. Look at, so many young people stuck in a cycle of short-term, low-wage jobs, struggling to get by, student debt through the roof. I mean, don't blame you. Don't blame you at all. I know where the pessimism's coming from. And I don't want to be pessimistic. I struggle to be optimistic. And my belief in socialism is a desire to keep optimism going. But that, again, points to kind of the way I grew up. Right? There was this feeling that it was kind of your obligation. Right? Again, this is the old America. Right? This is that Tom Sawyer stuff, that it's your obligation to be optimistic. Right? You can fit it in with the settler thing. We're going to a new land. We're going to build a new community. We're going to go to a new country. You can fit it in with the European immigration 1700s, 1800s thing. There's this, it is your moral obligation to be optimistic. It is your moral obligation to be working toward a goal. It is your moral obligation to be constantly trying to make yourself better. It is your moral obligation, And for me, socialism fits into that. But for other people, it's kind of like, yeah, the world sucks. What's the problem? I'm pessimistic. I think that we're all, breathing in too much CO2 and eventually the entire economy is going to collapse. But hey, if I can get some free healthcare on the way and smoke some pot, hey, what the hell? What the hell? I mean, there's this feeling that one must be optimistic. And that if you are not optimistic, you are kind of in dereliction of duty. That optimism is like a moral obligation. That's very much that old American values. And here's where it gets even weirder. And this is what makes it even weirder. And nowadays, right, in the United States, you got the left and the right. And the right, in terms of worldview, in terms of this feeling that one must be optimistic, in terms of this feeling that one must work hard, that's very much a right-wing mindset. The politics that I attach to it is completely different. But it's these small business owners, these fracking companies, these Trump people that are like, make America great again. We can do better than this. Woo! Move ahead. Yes, I am excited. We can keep going. No, global warming's not real. Don't take away. I'm going to make more money. I am going to have more consumerism. I'm going to go. I'm going to be an American. They've got the American go, go, go. They've got the things will get better. They've got that old American mindset. Whereas on the left, you get more of this, hey, things are out of control. Can we just calm down here? Let's just give people some health care. Let's stop consuming so much. And it's like the motivation for me to be a socialist is the same kind of motivation that makes a lot of people Trump people. I have different values than them. I have different economic beliefs. But I'm motivated by pessimism. I'm motivated by go, go, go. I believe in hard work. Whereas a lot of the people that are becoming socialists, it's rooted in this belief that, hey, the world sucks, things aren't going to get better, screw it, why can't I get a free thing? They get free shit, why can't I get free shit? Yeah, it's weird. It's very interesting. Very interesting. I saw that Greta Thunberg, is that her name, is urging people to take boats. urging people to take boats when they travel to the United States from Europe. Saw that, and I am not comfortable with that. And that's the weird thing. I'm concerned about global warming. And I know that jets pollute and that fossil fuels are bad, but why should we take a boat? In my mindset, the way to fight global warming is we ought to have non-gasoline powered planes. We ought to have nuclear powered planes. We ought to have, electrical powered planes. We ought to have, solar powered planes that can go twice as fast. It's like, I'm just not comfortable with regression. And she says, oh, let's take a mode of transportation that is slower, that is less advanced. I can't do it. I see that and I'm just like, okay, you're right, it's better for the environment. I don't dispute you. But I just feel like saying that we should go backward is just, I can't be that way. And, I'm not the only person to have this idea about pessimism and all of that. I mean, if you look at it, progress. I think it's one of the big self-help gurus. I can't remember which one. Someone was telling me about him, that he pushes this notion of progress. And it's true that people want to feel good about their own lives. People want to feel like they're going places in the world. Like they're getting things done. Right? People are happy when they have something to look forward to and they think things are getting better. So, I mean, it seems to be built into us humans that we want to advance. Right? That's my book, City Builders and Vandals. I associate socialism with the city-building tendency. Right? So, but I feel like there is a lot of pessimism among millennial socialists. And there's a lot of optimism as confused and bigoted and economically nuts and in some cases downright foolish. There's a lot of optimism among the right-wing Trump people, right? They're optimistic. I mean, hey, maybe I'm getting rambly here, but I find it to be interesting. I find it to be very, very interesting, right? I mean, I'll tell you, I love old Communist Party literature from the 1930s. William Z. Foster is like my favorite writer. I've got every book William Z. Foster ever wrote. I might even, I have got a picture of William Z. Foster hanging on my wall over there. I'm tempted to turn you around, but I'm not going to do that. Better we stay in one place and we don't all get seasick here. You'll get seasick plenty when you're riding the boat with Greta Thunberg or whatever. But I like old Communist Party literature. William Z. Foster, Earl Browder, Gus Hall. A lot of that stuff I really like. And I read all that stuff. And it was funny, when I meet younger people that are interested in Marxism, they don't read that stuff. They don't, and it never even, it's not that it's not available, because, it isn't, but it doesn't occur to them, But as soon as I got interested in Marxism, I wanted to read what American Marxists had said. So I read William Z. Foster. So I read, James Cannon, the founder of American Trotskyism. I figured, okay, if I'm going to try to be a Marxist or a socialist in the United States, I ought to read what people that are socialists and Marxists in the United States read. It's interesting. It's a lot to think about. But yeah, that's kind of my reaction to the debate. And that's, again, it's what makes me realize that we have a different brand here. What we do here, and the big win that we just had by debating this game streamer fellow, it's a big win for us, but we in this community are a different brand. We are a different kind of socialist. And the difference in us isn't in terms of policy, it's in terms of mindset. I feel like we're more in touch with, what the International Working Men's Association, the First International believed, the Second International believed, the Third International believed. We are very much a remnant of the internationals, of international Marxism, right? Karl Marx formed the First International. and it was very small. And it was the International Working Men's Association, IWA, First International. And Marx was part of it, and so were a lot of anarchists, and they had a lot of fighting, and it eventually kind of fell apart. But at the time that Marx was alive, we saw the very beginning of the German Social Democratic Party. Friedrich Engels saw the emergence of the Second International. It was the Second International that got to be really, really big, and that was the Social Democratic Party of Germany. That was French socialist groups. That was the British Labour Party eventually. It was just a big mass movement across Europe. That was Marxism really booming. Was the Second International. And the Second International, in Germany they had summer camps, and they had sports leagues, and they built the labor movement all across Europe, and it almost took on the character of like a secular religion, you could argue. There were socialist choirs and socialist marching bands, and we had this in the USA too. Eugene Debs, we were late to the game, right? But at first it was Daniel de Leon who had the Socialist Labor Party. And Daniel de Leon was a bit of an ultra-leftist, and so he really couldn't capture. He was very, very, dogmatic. He was against labor unions because the only answer was revolution, etc. So then you had Eugene Debs who came along, and he made American socialism really blow up. And you had the Socialist Party of America, and they got like almost 1 million votes in the 1912 election. They got 900,000 votes, and the Socialist Party, big organizations, and it was Marxism kind of became like it was like a way of life. I think that part of the anti-religious streak in Marxism during that time was the fact they were almost competitors, right? You're going to join the church, you're going to go to a church choir, you're going to be in a church sports league, or you're going to join the socialists, and you're going to be in a socialist sports league. It was like that, right? And the fact that Marx was an atheist and all of that, it was, especially in Europe, it was a mass, like, alternative to religion. It was like a big community. And when you build a big community involving millions of people that are a mass movement, and they build the labor unions, and they build community assemblies, and they have, like the International Workers' Order, the Workmen's Circle that provides social insurance, and you build something like that, you can't have it be like a resentment. It can't be like a drive for a policy based on resentment, right? You can't build a community around that, right? It has to be about something more, and you have ideology. That's what ideology is. And it seemed like socialism was the new ideology to replace the dying ideology. As people started to realize that, with evolution and that the 7-day, 6-day creation in the Bible is not true, and that the church was corrupt, it was like socialism was this new replacement for religion. And it was rooted in the same kind of optimism, right? In religion, it's if you live a good life and you work really hard and you do what a good Christian's supposed to do, after you die, you're going to go to heaven. Socialism is like, if you join our movement and you work really hard and you do good things in the world, we'll build a better tomorrow. We'll build heaven here on earth. And, the Marxist movement and the religious groups didn't particularly care for each other. There were some exceptions. Christian socialism was a big movement that existed, but the Marxist movement was very, very secular. The Marxist movement was very, very secular. And, it's just interesting to think about. I'm kind of rambling here, but millennial socialism, what worries me about it is the pessimism. I'm worried about the pessimism there. So, I hope this wasn't an incoherent rant. I hope I said something productive here. But, hey, I'm having a great time. What else is on people's minds? What else is new? The ruling class hides their ideology under the guise of normalcy. Your thoughts on the pro-democracy protests in London? Brexit, it sounds like a mess. It just sounds like a big mess. Sounds like a big mess. You think Trump's bad, Boris Johnson's pretty bad also. People want me to talk about the Amazon. I talked about that with George Galloway last week. That's on YouTube. You can watch that. I've done stories about it. It's pretty bad. I'm not denying that that's bad. And someone asked me, why does Bernie Sanders support the Hong Kong protests? Why does Bernie Sanders take the positions he takes on a lot of international issues? Because he's not a Marxist. I mean, he's a social democrat. He's a democratic socialist. He doesn't himself believe in a centrally planned economy. He's, and he used to be much more anti-war than he is now. I understand Yugoslavia was kind of a turning point for him when he supported Bill Clinton's action against Yugoslavia. I've been very, very clear that Bernie Sanders' foreign policy is not my view. It's not. There are things I like about Bernie Sanders, but I don't endorse any candidate. In order to do my job the way I do my job, I have to be objective. Kinky says, George Galloway calls you his favorite U.S. journalist. What a compliment. Hey, I'm happy about that. George Galloway is a great guy, and I look up to him in a lot of ways. And, I'm deeply complimented by that. But yeah, I mean, Bernie Sanders, I don't endorse any candidate. I'm excited about Bernie Sanders, and I would say of all the candidates that seem to be, top tier, that are polling in big numbers, he's the one that most appeals to me. But there are things about him I just don't agree with. I mean, his international stuff, I don't agree with. And I was happy to see that Bernie Sanders praised China for its poverty alleviation activities. I think that's great. That's stuff that, well, never mind. Anyway, I think that's good. I was happy to see Bernie Sanders praising, praising the foreign, the poverty alleviation of China. But, when it comes to Syria, when it comes to Russia, when it comes to a lot of things, I'm just not where Bernie Sanders is at. And, I'm close to where Tulsi Gabbard is at, but she's also a big supporter of Israel. I'm not. Tulsi Gabbard, there's things I don't agree with her on as well. I like Andrew Yang in a lot of ways, but his big policy, universal basic income, not totally sure about. What I like about Andrew Yang is he seems to have this notion that he's going to come into office and control the economy, and that what makes him like an ideal candidate is that he will control the economy, and I like that. This notion he wants to create the Yang Index, which will be a measure of economic growth, that he will then measure his own success and failure. I think that's great. I think that's great, personally. Yeah, Mike Gravel was interesting. I think he was great. I've retweeted him before. He's dropped out of the race, from what I understand. But, I will say that those four I named are the ones that appeal to me the most. But again, I don't endorse any candidate. There's things about all four of them that I disagree with. The candidate who scares the crap out of me is Tulsi Gabbard. Or I'm sorry, did I just say that? The candidate who scares the crap out of me is Kamala Harris. This is a woman who worked hard to get an innocent man, to keep an innocent man on death row. You look at her record. I did a video about the Wrecking Crew and Hillary Clinton. She fits a certain psychological profile that the imperialists have discovered how to very, very effectively use. And, at that recent DNC event where Bernie Sanders spoke, and then right as he was being introduced, they all walked out of the hall. Right? They all walked out of the hall chanting, "She's smart, she's strong, with Kamala we can't go wrong." Basically sending the message that if Bernie gets the nomination, they won't back him. That's basically what they were saying. That if Bernie gets the nomination. And Hillary Clinton has pulled this before. I don't know if you remember Puma. Do you folks remember Puma? Right? Party unity, my ass, right? Do you remember Puma? I remember Puma, right? And that was weird. Didn't really have an effect on the election at all. Obama still won overwhelmingly. But there was the Hillary Clinton wing of things it doesn't play ball, right? It likes to kind of threaten people. And that was after Obama got the nomination. Puma was this trend among Democrats who did interviews and stuff. It was like all over the media, party unity, my ass. Oh, yeah, Puma, I don't like Obama. Yeah, it was weird. It was weird. And it's pretty clear that Kamala Harris, whatever faction it is that is aligned with Clinton, the wrecking crew, the let's overthrow governments around the world, let's create instability around the world, that internationalist faction, that faction that that really favors foreign interventions and color revolutions and things like that. That faction, that they've picked Kamala as their candidate, and I mean that's being blatantly reported on. People say Hillary's funders are now funding Kamala Harris. They hate Bernie Sanders. They would rather have Trump than Bernie Sanders. And Kamala Harris, she's really good at screaming and yelling and speaking demagogically, but the facts show that she's a person who's really not concerned with justice and morality. I mean, the fact that she put so many people in prison for smoking marijuana and then freely admits she did it herself, right? Never occurs to her there might be any problem there, right? The fact that she would work really hard to make sure that evidence didn't surface to keep an innocent man on death row. This is pretty awful stuff. It's the perfect person to be running an international wrecking crew. Obama told the Atlantic Monthly, I believe they did. Atlantic Monthly did an interview with Obama, and Obama thought the best moment of his presidency was when he was able to not bomb Syria in 2013. The fact that he was able to hold off and not do it. It's big. The other thing is Obama's greatest regret of his presidency is the way Libya went down and how Libya is so unstable because of him. Right? Who was disagreeing, is in just solid disagreement with Obama on both of those issues, would be his Secretary of State in both of those instances, Hillary Clinton. Not a big fan of Obama, but Hillary Clinton pushed Obama like crazy for Libya, and then cheered gleefully when she found out Obama was dead. Hillary Clinton says that it was a big mistake that Obama did not bomb Syria in 2013. So think about that. And that, Obama represented one particular faction that was in alliance with the Hillary Clinton faction, right? The deal was Obama would be president, she would be Secretary of State. Now, with Kamala Harris, they want to be in the White House again. And it seems to me like Hillary Clinton was going to take her State Department leadership that Obama didn't particularly agree with and was going to take that into the White House. And that Trump stopped that from happening. And that there are probably factions that realize, again, getting a little off topic here. But, folks, I'm having a great time. We're having a great time talking about things. And, and I do follow Eva Bartlett. Someone said, yes, I pay very close attention to her. Yeah, a lot going on in the world today. But we won. That debate is big. That debate is very, very big. I mean, we're having a great time here. We're doing great. Yeah, I mean, I think that debate was a big win for us. And I hope that you take the time to watch it. I hope that more people come and join our community here because of it. I think that would be a great victory for us. I really hope that happens because we are doing something very, very special and unique here. We really are. So, yeah. I mean, hey, I do a live every week. I'm feeling kind of relaxed. I put all my energy into that debate from yesterday. So I'm just kind of, relaxing here. As I'm supposed to remind you, I'm giving a talk in Providence, Rhode Island on September 5th, which is Thursday, at Community Cafe. So come on out to Providence if you're in the area. It'll be fun, near Brown University. It'll be live streamed. It'll be fun. I'm looking forward to it. Yeah, we're having a great time here. So, all my best wishes to you all. I think I'm wrapping it up here. I'm tired. Watch the debate. It was fun. I had a great time. And you all are great. Let's keep what we're doing here going as much as we can. We're doing great stuff here. Thank you.